All right, perfect. So for the next session at GroupBy, we've got Julie from Microsoft talking about SQL Notebooks 101 for people with Azure Data Studio. So take it away, Julie.
Oh, thank you, Rent. All right, so this is me. I didn't put my picture there. So I'm a PM at Microsoft. So I work quite a lot with Azure Data Studio these days. My background is actually data warehousing, BI, and analytics. And I've decided I really want to help a lot of the data professionals out there to be able to make the most out of data. And I think the best way in my thinking or my thought process is that if I can introduce a tooling that can help you to get more access to your data so that you can make sense of more your data quicker and easier, that would be awesome. So here I am. So I'm a Azure Data Tools and Experiences PM. So I go by Mystical Girl on Twitter, so MSSQL Girl. So today I want to go through pretty basic notebooks 101, why notebooks, and I'll show you the demo on Azure Data Studio and how you can get to some references. But in particular, I do want you to go to ak.ms Azure Data Studio, because that's where most of the kind of resources that I'm showing today will be available from there, except for the demo. The demo will have different references. Yeah. All right, so let's get started. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun here. You know, with the work from home situation, a lot of the time we go online and a lot of the conversation happens to be kind of like on chat. So here's what usually someone asks me as a data analyst. Folks like marketing or perhaps someone in the business actually ask things like, hey, I need to know which product has the fastest turnaround. And then I'd go, as a data analyst, I'd go, yeah, let me create that. SQL is pretty easy. We're SQL people, we can do that. So this is what I'll start with. Okay, so I'm not too familiar with the, the table schema, so I'm going to do just like top 10 star to see what the columns there are. And then I'll start writing more proper query, and then I give back the results to the marketing folks. Then marketing asks, hey, the query that you sent me, or the results that you sent me based on the query that you wrote, it's missing the product category. And then so I go, right, sure, let me go do write another query. So here's a longer one. So I send it back, and then they'll ask, hey, is this for the last quarter? I wanted to know the product that has the fastest turnaround in the last quarter. And then I go, do you mean sold products? Because we don't have any dates on the product. So so I thought, okay, let me just craft this query, send it to them. And then they'll say, oh, yay, you're a rock star, thank you. So I'm happy, and I go my way. And then I realized that in my favorite tool, whatever that might be, usually SSMS, and could be also Azure Data Studio, this is what it looks like. So this is my dirty little scripts in the closet where someone asked me as simple as, can you please provide me the fastest turnaround products? This is the mess that goes underneath it, right? So 23 days later, someone would ask me again, or maybe the same person asked me again, that list that you gave me, can you refresh it? And I go, what list? Oh, that list. Yeah. Okay, let me just, scramble and run it again. So I send it to them, and then they say, I want to compare that result from what you just sent from the one from 23 days ago. And I go, what did I send again? So I go to my email, I compare it. It's all a mess. So the problem that you might see here, besides me panicking, is the fact that it was really hard for me to reproduce the code that I just wrote and the thought process that I had at the time when I was writing the first time, and then the first time 23 days ago, and then the final time that I want to share with the folks. And then the second thing is, you saw the dirty little scripts in the closet, right? Obviously, it's hard for other people to code review, so it was a bit challenging. And I might write it in a way that is acceptable for my style, but for other people to review to understand the context of how the queries were written, might be a little bit challenging. On top of that, when someone's doing the code review, they don't see the results. If you're a data analyst or if you're a SQL person and having to look at the data, not just querying, but also being able to interpret the data, if you separate the code from the results, sometimes it's hard to review whether it's correct or not. So the next thing is, I think I've mentioned before, something to do with the context. So if you don't provide the context of what you're trying to write, what you're trying to achieve, it makes it harder for people to review too, and for you to come back to it. And if you were to do this, say, oh, you know what, I'll be a nice person, I'll document it nicely in Microsoft Word or OneNote and whatnot, but it's not executable. So you kind of have to do a lot of copying and pasting. So it turns out that we can abstract this to, or solve this with a lot of the aspects that notebooks have today. So notebooks definitely allow you to store your code. You can document around it. I understand that you can uncomment pieces of code to kind of put the documentation or put comments there, but it's a little bit different when you have to provide documentation with some graphs or diagrams inside it to explain things. And then you can, in notebooks, you can also have results, visualization of the results, the analysis and the interpretation, and you can execute it as well, as long as you have access to the environment. So when you think really about it, when I saw notebooks the very first time, probably 3 years ago or something like that, probably more than that, when I also started getting into data science, it reminded me a lot of the school science project. You get given with a bunch of questions that you want to solve. You probably start formulating some kind of hypothesis or some kind of like a proposed way of solving these questions. You start having, preparing all the things, the data that you need or materials that you need, and then you come up with some kind of procedural steps on how to get to the results, and you provide a conclusion. The goal is that if someone else have to look into your research, they can replicate that research. And it turns out that it's not just data science that needs this capability, but it's also data analysts, also a lot of you who do a lot of the troubleshooting, for example, DBAs, actually could really take advantage of the framework. What I really love about notebooks, it's not just the mechanical aspect of it, but it's the framework that it actually provides you or allow you to do. So the concept of a notebook is actually not too new. There is a concept of a command shell for interactive computing. So that was IPython, which eventually moved or get absorbed in this open source movement with the Jupyter Notebook. So a lot of the other, when we talk about notebooks, generally speaking, people are implementing the Jupyter Notebook open source standard. That way, if you have one notebook in that you can open, say from Azure Notebooks, you can likely open it in Jupyter Notebook Server or Jupyter Notebooks. You could also potentially open it in Azure Data Studio, which actually a lot of the Jupyter Notebooks, I suppose, files can be opened in Azure Data Studio. So Azure Data Studio implements Jupyter Notebooks purely because we have a lot of data professionals out there. A lot of you are SQL people, since this session is for SQL people. A lot of you are SQL people that likely would really benefit from this framework of the reproducibility side of the notebooks. So it was introduced in 2018, and then in 2019 we decided, okay, what if we make the Jupyter Notebook to be able to run against SQL kernel? Because when Jupyter Notebook was first created, it was supporting more on the Python side of things and more data science type of languages or kernels. But we decided there is really a need of supporting SQL as well. So we started supporting SQL and then PowerShell, and there is, I believe, yeah, this is already in public preview, so I can talk a little bit about it. We also support Kusto querying as well. It's still using Python kernel, but you can use KQL magic to do that. Now, to use notebooks, you don't have to know Python, but if you do, it sort of helps you some of the thinking. If you know SQL, you can use notebooks right away today using Azure Data Studio, and I'll show you now what it looks like. So some of you may be new to Azure Data Studio, so this is what it looks like here. I do have two versions running here because I do want to show you. This is my Azure Data Studio, which is a the public release one, but there's also the insiders version. So if I'm game enough, I think I'm going to be game enough in this session. I will use the ADS Insiders. So ADS Insiders is, when I say ADS, I mean Azure Data Studio, by the way, it's a three-letter acronym thing. So when I use Azure Data Studio Insiders, this is really an early preview that we're sharing with you before we go GA or before we go publicly release it. You can use it already, but it's just in the preview mode. So if you go to, once you install Azure Data Studio, make sure that you also click check for updates just to get to the latest version of Azure Data Studio. So let's, I'm going to pause for a little bit just in case there's any question. I should.
No, you're, I think you're okay so far.
Okay.
I think you're good.
All right, good. Yeah, for some reason the chat, Windows not showing up for me.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'll pop in whenever questions pop up.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Fred.
All right, cool.
All right, so this is what Azure Data Studio with a notebook open looks like. So let me just try to create a new one so that way you know what the first experience looks like. If you have a connection to your SQL server today, you will see something that looks like this, which is somewhat familiar. So it's sort of like, it's just like Object Explorer in SSMS, if you're more familiar with SSMS. So I could right click, and then there's a way of me choosing, you know, whether to manage it, create new query or new notebook. So for now, I'm just going to click on new notebook. So this is just a normal SQL server. In fact, this is actually running on my Docker container. So what I'll do next is, there are a couple of controls here that would be useful for you to know. In notebooks, there's a concept of two types of cells. One is code and one is text. Code is something probably you're more familiar with because you have written SQL script for a long time. So you could probably write something like select star from sys.databases. So I do that, and then I can run it, so it returns the result. So it's pretty similar to when you just write a query. So let me just copy and paste, and then just run that. And let me share it side by side. There you go. That way you get to see it. All right. So here you can see, essentially it's pretty similar. Okay. You know, what's new about it? What's new about it is that when I save this file and share it with you, you also get to see the results. Whereas if I share this query and share it with you, you'll probably just see the code and that's it. All right. So here's an example of, let me go to the file explorer in the Azure Data Studio. So if I click on it, it shows me the list of notebooks that I have. So let's open up, I think I have it open, but just in case, let's open up this one. Let me just move it here. Okay, and close this part. And save. All right, so this is an existing notebook that I've just opened. I've run this before. And I have shared it with somebody else. And when they open it, they should be able to see the exact same thing, even though they don't have connection to my server. So the top part here is a lot of text, and I'll talk about the text a little bit later. But here's the example of where I've written some code. It's pretty long, and I could see the results. I'm not running it at all. I'm just viewing the notebook as is. So if I share this with you, you will see exactly the same thing, the code as well as the results, which is what's cool about it and super useful for querying. So let me go back to the blank notebook. So I've talked about the code cell here. So let's try to create a text cell. Usually I create a text cell when I want to provide more information. So I could say my first notebook, and then if I want to make it a kind of like a title, I want to make it as a header, so I just put a hash in front of it. Now this here is called the Markdown format, or the Markdown syntax. Now there is an active work that we're working on within my team, within the ADS team, to improve the experiences for the Markdown editing, or for the text cell editing. So in case you're not too familiar with the Markdown syntax, then you could easily use the toolbar on the top. So for example, author, and then I'll put Julie, and then I can make it bold, and then I could also do hello world, whoops, and then group by conference. So, and it's pretty neat and tidy. So yeah, so this is your first basic notebook that you could create. Now the next thing that you'll notice here, by default, Azure Data Studio sets the kernel to SQL. If you're familiar with Python, you could write Python. If you're familiar with PowerShell, which a lot of you probably do, especially from the DBA side of the world, with all of the automation that you do, you might really enjoy trying out the PowerShell, the PowerShell kernel. So essentially, it's just connecting to your local installation of PowerShell, and then you can start write PowerShell. I'm not as well versed in PowerShell, so let's see if we have time at the end. I'll share a little bit of PowerShelling using notebooks. And
you already have a couple of good questions on that too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Corey asks, are you able to put both SQL and PowerShell within the same notebook?
All right, so that's a really, really great question. We do get this quite a lot. Technically speaking, you could write a text cell that, a code cell where you can start typing get child item, I think. This is where my PowerShell is not really that strong, right? Yeah. So you could technically switch your kernel to PowerShell and then start writing PowerShell. So when it's finished changing, it should probably give me, is it get child item?
And then switch back and forth.
And then you can switch back and forth. That's right. I can't remember the PowerShell command. Oh, there you go. What do you know? I actually know some PowerShell. So you could switch back and forth, and if you save it, the file will be saved as is, and it'll just be fine. You'll see the results. It's just that you don't get the IntelliSense. See how the IntelliSense is now like the IntelliSense kind of like disappearing from the SQL one here. So what we want to do, we've heard a lot of requests where, hey, is it possible to actually have a cell attached to a specific kernel that way you can run multiple things? So that's in our backlog, or something that we are considering strongly. If you have more use cases, please do go to the Azure Data Studio GitHub and then raise issue there. There's an easy way of doing that too. So if you look at on the bottom right here, you can tweet your feedback or submit a bug. So if you click on it, it will go through the process of raising a bug. This will get posted to GitHub.
Then Yanav asks, do Azure Data Studio Notebooks have the same Jupyter Notebook keyboard shortcuts?
The Jupyter Notebook Jupyter Notebook keyboard shortcut. It's a great question. It's something that we're also looking into. It's in our backlog. So short answer is not today, but something that we're considering strongly. By the way, if you are coming, or if you have used Jupyter Notebook already, please do shout out on the chat, and then I'll review it after when it's appropriate.
Okay, cool.
At the end of the presentation.
Cool. And you've got a couple other questions, but I'm going to hold them till later because they're not specifically related.
Okay, sounds good.
Very cool.
All right, so this is what I guess a basic notebook should look like. So you can change the kernel. If you're using SQL, like earlier, you can attach it to a specific to a specific database or specific server. So what I did earlier when I first created this notebook, the way that I did it before was right-click on the server or database rather, and then click on New Notebook, and then where I go. But in case you want to change it to a different different database, then you can choose any of the ones that you can connect to. And again, just a friendly reminder that if you do save this file with the results like this, if you share the results, then everybody could also see it. So so next couple of things, let me just delete this part here. That way I can demo the run cells. So I could create another say statement. So for example, select that version, maybe select top 10 stuff from sys.configurations, like that. Now, if I'm super lazy and I know that this notebook is pretty straightforward, I can just run all cells. The best button to do that is to click on this run cells. So now it will run every single cell in serial mode, one by one, until it's done. So it's pretty quick and easy to do if you just kind of like in a rush. And then the next thing is these clear results. So if you have this notebook with the results and you want to share the code, but not so much the code and the context around the notebook, but you don't want to share the results because maybe it's a little bit sensitive, then you can click on clear results, and then there you go. We only have the code and then the text. No results going to be saved.
Kyle asked the exact opposite question. Kyle goes, can you display only the results and hide the code?
No, actually, that's a good question.
I'd never heard that before.
Yeah. So interestingly, so I come from our world as well. So I used to use R Studio quite a bit and create the .rmd files if you're familiar with that. In that, it's usually the opposite, where you kind of hide the code, but you show the results.
Yeah.
So not in Notebook today. I'd be interested in understanding the scenario a little bit more in terms of why you want to share the results, but not the code. Do let us know. Maybe it's something that we can definitely consider in the future.
And then a couple of folks have asked, are there any limitations on the size of the result set?
I cannot remember on top of my head in terms of the result size. I know that if you have, say, thousands of rows, I don't recommend saving it. So in the case that you do need to have it saved as part of the notebook, I would also be curious in terms of your use cases. So here's my somewhat rationale behind. I personally don't tend to save thousands and thousands of rows results anyway. So here's the thing. So if you're doing data analysis and then you're viewing lots of data set in the thousands of rows, it's hard for you to consume anyway. So what would be better, especially in the spirit of reproducibility, is to write the query in a way that is, I suppose, in a way that can show the things that you really want to point out. So it's a little bit like Brent's really good at this because he writes blogs, he writes books, right? So he's really into pointing out the obvious, like which one is the one that someone has to worry about. Focus their attention to it. When you display like thousands of rows, people are going to look at it. What's going on? Now it's a different story if you want to do a data sharing, in which case I'm not quite recommending doing data sharing in a notebook, just because it's not the most efficient way of sharing data. You might as well do something else with it in terms of data sharing. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, one more button that would be super useful to do is this collapse cells. So if in the case of like really long code in the code cells, so this is not too long, but you could click on collapse cells and then that's it. It's pretty neat and tidy, especially if you don't need to really read too much on the code itself, then you can click on the collapse cells. then you can expand to all cells as well. So I'll show you where this becomes super handy. So let's see this one here. This is a good example of a data analysis notebook. And I intentionally prepared this somewhat mimicking the workflow that I used to do when I was working in the business analytics team in my previous team at Microsoft. We handled a lot of, or I worked with a lot of data where it is used for business reasons, for for analyzing what do we want to do next, and especially marketing related things sometimes. So in this instance, I'm actually just using White World Importers database, which is something that you're probably familiar with that you can download on online. So in this scenario, I'm doing a marketing experimentation. The CEO wants to understand, hey, we want to run a campaign. Give me the products that we can experiment with. And then I work with the marketing team and define what the rules are. And then they ask me for the list of the products. So usually that's how it goes in terms of quote unquote requirements gathering, right? Of course, there's quite a bit of back and forth, but at the end of it, I should be able to provide this notebook that I can go back to or someone else can help reviewing. So in this data analysis exercise, I'm actually providing the abstract of what is the purpose of this notebook or this data analysis, the introduction, so the logic of what I'm trying to, what I've worked or what I've come up with the marketing team. And then I'll go right away to the get and inspect the data. So this is, remember the scientific method that I showed you earlier with the reproducibility aspect of it? You state the questions. So essentially this is like the questions. And then you start showing the materials or the things that you need to for the work. So getting the data is part of it. So here's my query with the results. So in case it gets a bit too much, I can collapse the cells now. Now, the marketing team might not be as interested in the code itself, so they can just collapse the cells and then they can look at the results right away. So now I can move to the, scroll down a little bit. And this just shows the unique stock items. So if I expand it, I can also collapse it individually. I can identify the product group. So this is the step of, because in this notebook or in this analysis, I need to identify 2 product groups. So this is the first one with a lot of results. And then the second one, again, the query with a lot of results. And then all the way on the bottom, I would say, hey, this is my conclusion. These are the things that marketing team should look at. And this is the total revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And then this is the code related to the conclusion. But I'm likely not going to need the marketing team to run it. So I've provided the nice charts that they can do. So essentially, if you're already using Azure Data Studio today, you would see that in even a basic SQL query, you would have the controls on the top where you can see the tables. Oops. Got minimized too much. You can see the table results, and then you can switch to charting, and then you can configure the charts to whatever that you'd like to best help with your conclusion. So yeah, so this is a simple example of data analysis notebook. I'm going to pause there because I'm going to jump to the troubleshooting side of things.
Ooh, so then let me throw in a couple of questions. Yanav says, can I add additional color themes, like with VSIX code or VSIX files like in VS Code?
Color theme in what sense?
I'm guessing he means the, like charts. Oh.
On the charts itself. I actually haven't tried that. Aaron, have you tried it before?
No, it's JSON, so it should be possible, but yeah, I haven't tried it. Yeah, obviously on Azure Data Studio itself, yes, you can do color themes just like VS Code.
But yeah.
The J asks, is there a way to collapse the results?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And Brooke says, what are the export options? I'd like to be able to send a non-technical person something like an Excel file, a PDF.
Right. So let me show you this one here, which actually has a little bit more data. Say you want to do a little bit of a data dump of this to the marketing team. When you have the tabular results looking like this, you could, which is by default, this is what it will show. Then you could save it as CSV or Excel or JSON or XML, and then the last option is obviously to do the charting. So yeah, there are 4 ways of doing that. Obviously, it will be saved as separately as a different file. It won't be attached to this notebook.
Corey says, if you're using PowerShell, for example, can you tie the results from one code result set to another code block? And then other people were asking, for example, like Don, can I do parameterized queries? Can I send results for one query down to the next query?
So, really great question. I love this question actually. One of the things that we're working on, that we're considering, is also parameterization, because we've got a lot of asks from it. Would be really good to know. I understand the scenario from a few folks that I've talked to, especially Aaron.
I do have something to contribute to. Go ahead. Yes.
But yes, it is something that that we really want to look into. Now, bear in mind, if you're writing PowerShell, so let me explain a little bit behind this. Now, SQL, I think Brett probably is better in explaining this than me, but anyway, I'll try. So in SQL, when you write a piece of code and then you execute it, say, when I run this, it runs it as a block. So that's a batch. Now, because the way SQL works is the variable that is considered in one batch is not going to be carried over to the second batch. That's what causes it the issue with carrying a variable or parameter from one code cell to another in SQL. Now, if you're writing Python, that is not the case, because it's just, there's no concept of batch as such, like in the same way as SQL. It's more like a session. So if you have a variable from one code cell to and you want to carry it over to the next code cell, it's possible. The same thing with PowerShell.
Yep, that's what I was just about to say. And while you guys were going, I was testing it. It looks like collapse cells is how you would hide everything except the first line of code. And then if you want to get rid of results, you have to clear results if you did want to display them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Functions.
Yeah, yep. But not collapse. Yeah, there's no concept of collapse results. It's clear results.
Yeah, clear results. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, off to the races.
Okay, all right. So I'll go to the next one. So I've been talking to Glenn, and I took the liberty of, actually, let me show you his website, because I do want to give credit to the work that he had done. So this is Glenn Berry's website. If you don't know him, he is super awesome in providing diagnostic queries. I learned quite a lot from what he has written over the years in terms of how to troubleshoot. Not that I've been an official DBA, but every now and then, when you work as a consultant, you get to troubleshoot quite a few things. So I sometimes lean on Glenn's queries in the past. So I was really excited when I saw him on Twitter mentioning the diagnostic queries that he has converted to Jupyter Notebook. I'm not sure whether that's the right one. I thought it was this one. Anyway, so I talked to him. This is his website. So I worked with him a little bit in terms of massaging the notebook that he has produced, mainly because I have a strong empathy as a PM. I understand sometimes the pain points of trying a new kind of like system, especially like, using Markdown. There's quite a lot there to learn. So Glenn and I have been talking a little bit the past few days, and then I said, okay, hey, how about I give it a go and then just kind of tidy it up a little bit to make it flow nicely and showcase what notebooks could do with his rich context from the querying side of it. So this is the one that I've produced. It's a diagnostic query. He has about 70 or something. So let me scroll all the way down. Oh, 80, my bad. So he had 84 queries. So the 84 queries, I've collapsed everything. So that's why you, oh, actually I haven't collapsed that much. This one I collapsed. So he has a lot of rich queries here that I've converted to, or that he has converted to code cells, and it's super awesome. So all you do is, say if I connect to, hello, oh, Teams connection, yeah, connect that. So all I can do now is just, you know, open the notebook from Glenn and run it, and then it gives me the results. So I'm running RTM SQL 2019 CU4, and then I can start. I wonder what this would do. Oh, there you go. It has results. Yay. So I can start running queries like this. And I can pick and choose, by the way. I don't have to do it in order. So for example, I'm not interested in query 3, but I'm interested in understanding the instance level configuration. So I'm going to run that. And then this gives me the results. And I can jump, you know, all the way to the section that I feel appropriate. For example, you know, maybe blocking. So since I'm not running anything on that instance, I don't have anything blocking. So it's super useful for DBAs too. Now, let me show you a couple of things as well that that you may find interesting too. There is a person, his name is Emmanuel Miazo. Actually, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him in person. Luckily, I've met Glenn before in the past, so I really appreciate what Glenn has done. So Emmanuel has also created or converted a bunch of, or curated rather, or collected a bunch of notebooks or queries that others have created, and he created a concept of a book. So this is a little bit of a kind of like a the next level of what you can do with notebooks. Now, notebook is just a notebook is just a one file. Like this is a one file. This is a one file. Now imagine if you're running a big team of perhaps DBAs or developers, of data analysts. More often than not, you would have some kind of like I suppose we call it standard operating procedures or SOPs, but out there, I think usually it's kind of like called onboarding guide or the how-tos or tutorials for people to either refresh their memory about certain topics or for the new people to come in and join. So with there's a concept of book, Jupyter Book, that organizes notebooks together. So in this example, we have like first responder kit. So this is the example. There's also SQL assessment API from the Tiger team that you can run. And then this is the Tiger toolbox. So Emmanuel has provided a bunch of notebooks based on other folks that have created it before. So I recommend checking that out as well. Yeah, so this is a good one. So definitely there's a good use case for troubleshooting or diagnostic querying for DBAs out there. I'm going to pause a little bit while I switch over to some kind of templates that might be useful for you. Any questions?
Yeah, let's see here. So Don asks, can you prompt for any user input when using either the PowerShell kernel or the SQL kernel, or does the code need to just run without any user interface?
Okay, you're pushing me to show PowerShell, so here it is. Aaron, help.
Nope.
All right,
I'm here.
so this is what PowerShell looks like.
Oh, there's an example.
There you go. Keep calm and learn PowerShell, Julie. That's my mantra every single day when I'm not doing my PM job.
Oh,
so we'll see how this one goes. This is something that I've created before. It's not perfect. Again, I'm still learning PowerShell. There is a module that is called AnyBox that allows you to input input values in a dialogue kind of way. Python also has it. So if I have time, I might show you Python as well. So here we go. So I've connected to PowerShell, and then it asked me for a subscription name. This notebook here, I happen to use as a kind of demo to my internal team. to showcase how you can use PowerShell, for example, to manage subscriptions and storage for the engineers in the SQL team. So in this instance, I can put in subscription name, say for example, whoa, my control isn't at the dialog box. Here it is. So I'll put, say, Aaron's name, subscription ID, whatever, and then storage account name, Aaron's closet.
There you go.
So there you go. So what happens is this part of the script is actually getting the details and storing them into a variable. I think if I remember correctly, I wrote this a while back. If I remember correctly, I was storing it like in an array essentially. So this is just displaying the array results, the label, the name, and the value.
Perfect.
So and then since it's stored in a variable, and then this is the next code cell here where it actually does more things. So I won't explain the detail except for just printing out nothing to see here. So that's what I wanted to do. So now it asks me, which one do you want to execute, the demo, the fingers crossed? I won't run the fingers crossed because I don't think I have it set up properly. It runs this. If I choose the fingers crossed, it will run this PS1 file, which I don't think I have it in the right location. So good choice, and click OK, and then it will print nothing to see here. So, nice. Or if I want to.
Oh no, Don's happy. Don's happy. He said, "Nice. That will be great for using with DBA tools." So I think you made him happy. So.
All right, awesome. So yeah, so yeah, you can put labels from the top to down here too. Anyway, so go ahead, Aaron.
Surely, one thing that would be cool that I think I started to articulate this once is just like that you could bring up the terminal for whatever the session is that is running the PowerShell session, and that you could just hand jam some input directly into it and things kind of like you can like if you brought up the PowerShell integrated console. So I don't know if that's possible to bring it up at that level, but sometimes when I get stuck on something, it would be nice if I had the access to the terminal session.
I see. Yeah. Okay. I know where to contact you, Aaron. We'll talk more.
Since we're in the middle of this demo.
Yeah. All right. So how much do I have left? 18 minutes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. So I talked a little bit earlier about the DBA's world, and I kind of alluded that, hey, there's a way of you to save your queries and provide context about the queries that you've written to help with the diagnosing things, like for example, Glenn's query earlier. So here's a little bit of a template that feel free to use it. And this is something that I have learned as well over the years in the SQL world, that more often than not, I have to produce something like this for somebody else to use as well. So here's a template for troubleshooting guide. So a simple thing like the title, give an overview of what this particular notebook will solve, and then show and talk about the symptoms, especially the customers from the end user's perspective, then how to identify the symptoms, and then provide the code on identifying the symptoms from the server side. And then list the mitigation. Maybe there's risk. So for example, if you have to restart the server, then usually there's a risk to the customers, and describe what happens if you do that. And then the mitigation step. So, from step 1 to however many steps, and then put the code here. Ideally, you may want to also, as part of the steps here, describe how to interpret the results of the mitigation step. And then verification step that talks about, if you had done all the mitigation steps, what should the person who executes this notebook see to verify that what you're troubleshooting is resolved. And then the next thing is, and this is quite important, to be able to notify whoever that might be, blocked by the issue, and let them know that, hey, I've resolved it, all's hunky-dory. And then some appendix or references. So yeah, so this is kind of like a rough template. That way you get to see why Notebooks can be a good framework because you can morph your troubleshooting workflow to this structure. And then here's the data analysis one. I went through a little bit more thoroughly earlier, but this is also similar, like the template for it. This is a bit more tailored toward data analysis. And then if you are actually a presenter or even have your own website, you could start producing the how-to tutorial. So this is sort of borrowing the best practices from the docs.microsoft.com in terms of structuring how to make it, a bit more readable in terms of how to. And this is something that I also drew from my past experience as well, as someone who actually had to do a how-to steps for others. Yeah, very similar to the troubleshooting one. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a little bit and I'll show you one, maybe two more cool things. Any questions?
Yeah, sure. R. Parada asks, sharing data, how do you do that with SQL? Like, is there a way, what I think she means is, can you use just T-SQL to put out the contents of whatever came into the notebook? And R. Parada, if I didn't get that right, rephrase your question.
Right. I think yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question properly, so let me just try, but feel free, I can hang out after and then answer it a bit more concretely. So where did let's just use this one. So actually this is a PowerShell one. Let me find my, whoops. Yeah, let me just close this one. So, so yeah, this is the T-SQL code that produces the results that I want.
They elaborated. So, they go taking the results from one panel and use it in another panel without temp tables. Oh, geez. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, not possible today in the SQL kernel. It's possible in PowerShell and Python.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool stuff. There is a, yeah, let me show you one thing that is super cool. If you are using SQL Server 2019 Big Data Cluster today, there is a good example of troubleshooting guide. So if you do in Azure Data Studio Control-Shift-P, this will show you the options that you can do. You can type search, the keyword that you want to search, but because I've done this before, so it's just I can choose the Jupyter Book SQL 2019 guide. So it will show it on the provided books. So in the provided books, it tells you the troubleshooting guide. Now, remember earlier I say, hey, DBS could really use this in a kind of like in a more structured format. So this is a collection of notebooks inside a book. So one of the engineers in SQL Server, his name is Stuart Padley. He and the team put together a troubleshooting guide, and he organized it in such a way that it's easy to jump to. So he organized it to like troubleshooters. So when you go to it, you can go to the specific notebook. So this is the TSG 100. TSG stands for Troubleshooting Guide. TSG 100, the Big Data Cluster Troubleshooter. So these are the steps, and then if you click on it, it will open up the right SOP, short for Standard Operating Procedure. Yes, we're full of three-letter acronym here at Microsoft. Anyway, so this shows you the code, and it happens to, for this big data cluster, it happens to rely on Python. In some of them, it might use some of the AC data commands, so you may see it every now and then sprinkled here and there, as well as PowerShell, and yeah. So this is a good example of what troubleshooting guide should look like. Quite a lot of the times I refer to this for folks who are getting started with, forming or curating a set of notebooks that help people to do troubleshooting. So yep, this one comes for free, comes with Azure Data Studio, check it out. There's one more cool thing that I want to show you, which is if I do Control-Shift-P, there is an ability to do new deployment. So if you want to do, if you already have Docker installed in your machine locally here, where you're in the same machine as Azure Data Studio, you could do deployment. So if I click on that, this will show you steps to create a new deployment of SQL Server instance. So for example, I could do SQL Server container image, choose SQL Server 2019, and then click select, and then it will ask me what's your container name. So I'm gonna say GroupBy conf, password. Okay, let's see. Sometimes, hopefully that would work. Okay, I'm running out of port number. 62433. There you go. Open notebook. So remember the things that I just went through is a wizard. Hopefully I typed in the password twice the same way. If I click on open notebook, it actually creates the steps to create to deploy SQL Server container using a notebook. So, and this is super cool because sometimes I don't remember all Docker commands. I switch between SQL, R, Python, DAX, kind of crazy quite a bit. So Bash, sometimes it's there too. So so this is super handy because I don't have to remember a lot of the Docker commands. So just that. So I keep clicking. I could also do the run cells, by the way, but I thought this is more fun while I'll let questions come in. So I'm up to the step where a container has been created. So let me see, where did it go? There you go, the GroupBy conf MySQL instance. So it's here. So when I clicked on it earlier, it produced this link, and this notebook actually can interact with Azure Data Studio. Now take a look at this, how it's actually popping up the manage view of a server. Actually, this is similar to as if you go right click and manage. Yeah. So yeah, so that's a cool kind of use case of notebooks. A little bit more on the advanced side. So notebooks are a great way to be able to interact with Azure Data Studio as well.
Oh, man,
then I have one last demo if we have time.
Lots of questions coming in now. I'll give you a couple of short ones. Is it possible to run multiple queries in parallel running the notebook? Excuse me, can you run multiple sections of code at the same time?
I don't think so. Let me think. I have tried it before, but the results was not as I expected.
Not
Aaron,
from
feel
an
free to chime in.
interface, I don't think. If you use the commandlet, maybe.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend it. Usually it's meant to be run one after another. Even in the Jupyter Notebook, the actual Jupyter Lab Jupyter Notebook server, when I tried that, it's usually not giving me the results that I am expecting. Yeah.
Gotcha. Corey says, he keeps hearing the term Jupyter Notebooks. What's different about Jupyter Notebooks as opposed to these notebooks?
Right. So I explained a little bit earlier during the session. So happy to go through that again. So Jupyter Notebook is an open source implementation of Notebook. So that's what we're using it as a basis that we extend in Azure Data Studio. Now there is so if you go to Jupyter Lab, I suppose that's what it's called, the Notebook. If you search it online, you'll likely land on something like this. So and then you can install it yourself. So this is what it looks like when it's Jupyter Notebook. And even if you're already using notebooks today, if you're using notebooks today, let me just sign in. Hopefully Let me sign in. It actually uses the implementation of Jupyter Notebook 2. It's a little bit more, I suppose, a little bit more closer to the Project Jupyter's one. Looks like it's taking a while. So I'm gonna let it rest a little bit on the side, and then I can come back to it if we have time. One more thing that might be useful to know is, yeah, let's see this one. So if you have a notebook and you happen to publish it online, there are some, so for example, like GitHub, it supports Jupyter Notebook viewer, like just the renderer side of it. So you cannot execute it, but you can view it. So here's an example of the ADS Notebooks demo that I've uploaded. I actually authored it using or created it using Azure Data Studio, but I uploaded it to GitHub, and then this is what it looks like. So let me show you another example. This is probably a bit lacking. This one is probably a bit better. So this is the SQL Notebook one. Even though Jupyter Notebook today, the open source one doesn't quite support SQL kernel, but even if I'm uploading in GitHub because they're using the same underlying Jupyter Notebook standard, it can view this really nicely, and it can even show the results. So if I publish it online on GitHub with the results, then it's going to show. If I share this file with you, you can download it and open it in Azure Data Studio. You'll get the same experience as if I'm opening this notebook here. So yeah. Can I do one more cool demo, maybe?
Of course you can. Of course you can.
Right.
And it's like the end time is flexible too. You know, like that technically it's supposed to be the end of the area and the bottom of the hour, but we have like half an hour to shoot the poop before the next person comes in. So.
All right, cool. So you're coming from SSMS and you're wondering, how am I going to use Notebook and just, try it out? So there is this task generate scripts. You might be familiar with it. So if I click on it, then it will ask me, hey, you want to generate scripts? Give me the things that you want to generate scripts for. Now, I used to do this quite a bit whenever I suppose I couldn't quite back up the database, but I do have access to generate the scripts. So I would, right click, choose task generate scripts, and then I get to this window. And then for this one, because my database is pretty simple, I'm just going to script the only objects that's available, which is the tables. And then let me just save it in this folder. I don't have to navigate too crazy. So I'm going to save it here. So that's what my script looks like. Just for fun, I'm just going to put GroupBy script, and then click next, and then next, and then it should save the notebook, the creation of the tables in a notebook. Okay, so I click finish. I think it stores it in the location that I intended to store it. So I'm going to go to the Explorer. Since I'm opening that folder, there you go. My GroupBy script is there. So this is the the scripts that was generated from SSMS into Notebook that I can open in Azure Data Studio that I can run. How cool is that? Very cool, hopefully.
Extremely cool.
Yeah. So if I want to, obviously if I use Hello World, it might actually crash because I already have it there. So let's say I want to create it in, let's see, my new server that I just created. So now I can do run cells. Oh, something is not quite right. Oh yes, because I don't have Hello World. In this case, I have to create database. Also, don't recommend this to create database on the fly, but since it's a demo, and then I can go maybe on here use.
Hey, Aaron, mute when you're not talking there.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Okay. So remember earlier I was showing you the the server that I just newly created with you during this session. So it didn't have anything before. Now it has the Hello World database that I just created earlier, and then I've got the tables created using this notebook. Pretty nifty, eh?
Nice. Lori Carr chats in and says, yes, that is very cool.
Cool. All right, 1 minute left. Any questions?
Well, I was going to let you know the next speaker warned us that they might be a little late coming in because they have a meeting that they couldn't get out of. So who knows, we might have a couple extra minutes here. Julie, did you cover, trying to tie it together from the questions we had from the previous session, did you cover how the Jupyter books allow you to solve the multi-kernel situation where someone wants to maybe run some PowerShell steps and then once the environment's set up, then run some T-SQL steps or vice versa?
Yeah, good point. So I can talk a little bit more about that. So let's see. Actually, I do have a good example. Let me show you the mess behind. Yeah, the mess behind my folder. So this is what it looks like. So I do have a lot of scripts, and when I open this folder in the Explorer, it will just show exactly the same thing. So this is the Explorer stuff, and then this is the real File Explorer on Windows, right? On some of these, I do actually have PowerShell scripts like this, right? I also have a SQL script, even Python maybe somewhere here. Let me see. Maybe I don't have Python one. Yeah, so I have a SQL script. So if you want to run one notebook after another, where it could be, you know, you want to run PowerShell, something in PowerShell kernel and something in SQL, since we don't have multi-kernel support today, the recommendation is to split it into different notebooks. That way it's a bit easier to run. Yeah, so there's a way of kind of managing that, I suppose. And one more thing that I haven't quite talked about, there is this preview feature called Create Book. So if you're on the notebook viewer and you click on the Create Book, it will ask you to run this notebook. So when you run it, it will prompt you the sets of notebooks that you want to create, and then convert it to set of the folder of where the notebooks you want to create, and then create a book. Let me see if I could quickly demo it, but I'll take more questions first. Let me just set this up first.
Yeah, sure. Over on YouTube chat, Laman asks, what's the fastest way to bring and load new notebooks into Azure Data Studio? And on a related note, Breck says, how do I get, you've got a lot of cool notebooks in here. Are you going to make those available? Like, how do I go about getting lots of notebooks like this?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm planning to post some of the things that I showed off today on my on this Jubilant Data Wizard. So some of them are already here, but I will add some more. I do have quite a bit of links here. By the way, Rob's session on notebooks, he had it yesterday. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it at the time, but I would also recommend going to his session in general. He has done quite a lot of notebook sessions, by the way. So he has a very interesting point of view from the DBA side. And today I was trying to bring in some of that data analyst side as well. So yeah, I'll share the links. If you follow me on Twitter, I'll also share these links there too. So yeah, so hopefully that helps. I think there's a second part of that question, Brent. Did I miss it?
Like is there a store or something where people can go and get, because like there's the plugins experience is so good, getting new plugins. Is there a way or a roadmap way to get new notebooks?
New notebooks in terms of the content itself?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, say, for example, if Tiger Team is shipping some sample cool demo and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Good point. Pam, Pedro, my colleagues.
And Julie, do you want to show the Control-Shift-P experience again?
Yeah, let me do that. So what we have today is this Jupyter Book SQL Server 2019 guide. So that's kind of the first experience to getting the latest troubleshooting guides from the SQL Server team on SQL Server 2019. Now, the long-term plan in terms of, hey, you know, I'm still managing SQL Server 2017 or 2016, and I want to make sure that I, you know, have the right content and whatnot, or way of troubleshooting. That's a bigger, longer conversation that I'm sure Pam, Pedro, and other folks are going to be interested in. So if you do have some feedback on that you want to have a troubleshooting guide in this way, do let us know. And if you're thinking that crowdsourcing, perhaps we do have a lot of strong SQL people in the community, perhaps crowdsourcing, you know, that way community can contribute to it. That might be an idea. I might be,
Gotcha.
People might be angry at me when I go back to work for giving people more work, but hey, it's for the community, for the SQL people, right? So if you're, you know, willing to chip in and contribute, maybe there's something that we can do.
Okay, and then the last one I'll ask is, Alex says there was a section with operations something, and I can't find it in my Azure Data Studio. He's trying to get where the books are at.
Oh, I see. So earlier I showed you the Control-Shift-P, so I assume you've gone to that step and have it loaded. So it's under my provided books. Yeah, so it will show here.
Cool.
So let me just repeat again. So Control-Shift-P and then type in Jupyter Books or SQL Server 2019. It should narrow down the list. The Control-Shift-P here, what's showing here, whoops, I pressed the wrong one. This shows the things that I have done in the past. It's kind of like, you know,
browser history.
Yeah, the history. But yours might look a little bit different, so you may have to type in the actual name, like SQL Server 2019.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks. Excellent presentation. Feel free to hang around afterwards. Everyone give a warm round of virtual applause to Julie over in Slack there. Very cool.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, it was amazing to have you join us.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I always like talking about these things and, you know, hearing your feedback too. So our team from Azure Data Studio, or from the tools team in general, we love engaging with you users. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to share it on the chat, and then I'll share it with the team too.